from PBS News Student Reporting Labs
and WETA.
This is On Our Minds
with Evelyn
and Eason,
a podcast made by teens for teens,
telling stories about who inspires us.
Hi everyone.
Hello.
So today we have two great conversations to share with you. Both of these conversations were recorded in person at the South by Southwest EDU conference.
Yep. First up, Beatrix, who's a student from Austin, Texas, interviewed the YA novelist Nick Stone.
Yeah, and Nick Stone is a New York Times bestselling author. She is best known for her first novel, Dear Martin.
And Dear Martin is about a high school senior at a predominantly white school who starts writing letters to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Hi, we're here with author Nick Stone. Oh my God. She seems really excited to be here.
Definitely.
I would say your words have definitely inspired me, especially like the part in Dear Martin where it says like, you can't control what other people think of you. Like that was such a revelation when I read it, and I connected to those words so much.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What moment in your life first caused you to cultivate that storytelling in yourself?
I know my earliest memory, I was 3 years old. I had a purple tricycle. That was my whip. Like we had places to go. I fell off of my tricycle outside of our townhouse and scraped my knee. And I have a very vivid memory of searching the asphalt for the missing skin. Because I'm like, where did my skin go, right? So I think even super young, my brain was piecing together notions of cause and effect. And when I was a little kid, I was a reader and I was a liar. Like I just lied compulsively, but that's what a storyteller is. Like you're just lying convincingly, right? So I don't know that there was necessarily a singular moment, but it's just been in me for a long time. Just stories and ideas and like wanting to put things together in new ways, and it's so much fun.
Like I kind of mentioned earlier before this interview, I read Dear Martin. I think there are a lot of ways in which like complex relationships interplay in that book. Lots of ways in which people grow, characters like Jared, right? And then like characters like Justice as well, who initially like has a ton of like pressure thrust on him. How do you think that relates to like the experience of like kids who may be reading your books?
So initially, when I decided to write Dear Martin, I was writing it for my sons, but the only real experiences I had to mine were my own. So a lot of what you see in Dear Martin is my own experiences in high school as like a high achieving Black kid who was the only kid in the class, the only Black kid in the classroom. And what I hope kids who are like Justice take from the book is that like they're not alone, right? Like I think the most beautiful thing about being human, and also the most fraught thing about being human, is this kind of deep internal question we all have about whether or not we're alone in the things that we're experiencing. So when I'm creating, for me, the aim is to touch on my own humanity, just so that anybody who's reading, who is able to identify with my humanity, will be able to identify with the character, right? Because I do think that there are things that connect all of us. So it is definitely meant to be a mirror, if you will, for the kids who are like Justice. But I also want kids who are not like Justice to read it and be like, hey, this kid, his life is different from mine, but I can totally relate to him because I've felt out of place before, or I've felt wrongly accused before, or I've felt like my friends are betraying me before. So like it's all about, for me, touching on these experiences that are as universal as it gets. Like I don't think that anything is totally universal, but I do think that as human beings, we have this range of emotions that we can tap and touch on through our interactions with other people, including fictional characters in books.
What do you want children to take away from your books? And what do you want adults to take away from your books?
You know what's fascinating is you already said it. So page 152, you pulled a quote from page 152 of Dear Martin. You can't change how other people think and act, but you're in full control of you. When it comes down to it, the only question that matters is this: if nothing in the world ever changes, what type of person are you going to be? That is what I want. I want adults and children. I want anybody who reads anything that I write to take from it this notion that like who you are is up to you. Who you are is your responsibility, right? Like when it comes down to it, there is one person on earth that you will be with until you die, and that is yourself. Other people will come and go, but like, are you a person you can live with until you die? That's a big question, but it's something that I want people to think about when they're reading stuff that I write.
Mm. Yeah. Whoa, that's very profound. I'm gonna be thinking on that for like a couple of days after this.
I've done my job then.
How have you navigated the world of publishing, the world of writing as an author? What are your routines like?
For me, process is very important. When it comes to writing novels, essays, anything, I have a mnemonic. I only eat raspberries. The I's for inspiration, and that's when I get an idea. It can come from literally anywhere. O, the next letter is O. I promise I'm a writer. O is for organization. So I buy a composition notebook. Every single project I have has its own notebook. I fill it with character names, character traits, plot points, like anything related to that particular idea will go in that notebook. Eventually I'll have enough to write a summary of the story. And then I'll write an outline, chapter by chapter. I move into E, which is execution, which is when I draft. It's my favorite part of the process because I just kind of go wild. And then revision is my least favorite part of the process, but probably the most important. And that's when you go back in and you kind of clean up what's there and you make it shine. And everything that I've written, I've used that process. What I will say for you as a writer, number one, keep writing. Number two, recognize that there is no getting it right. So don't overthink the process is my primary piece of advice. Just let what comes out and know that you can fix it once you're done.
Thank you. This was an absolute honor and delight.
A pleasure.
So, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Lovely to meet you, Beatrix.
Lovely to meet you as well.
Yeah, so one moment from that conversation I really can't stop thinking about is when Nick Stone asked, are you someone you can live with, right? Like, until you die, because you're with yourself until you die. And I think so much of our lives we've been taught to read rooms and not really instead to learn how to sit with ourselves and be okay with ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting perspective actually on like self-confidence, because the whole time I think of self-confidence, I think of it as like kind of a momentary thing. Like if I'm having a presentation, am I like confident or something like that? Or, you know, like just momentary thoughts, but then kind of putting it into a whole perspective, like you're living your whole life with this guy. I mean, yourself, you need to be self-confident. Otherwise it's going to be like a miserable time for your whole life because you're not comfortable with yourself.
I agree. I recently saw this thing that was like the comparison between self-worth and self-confidence. And I think someone said that self-confidence is your like ability to believe in yourself when you're doing a certain skill. But self-worth is like at the end of the day, no matter how I am, like I like myself and I know that I'm enough.
Well, I guess then self-worth is kind of what I'm looking for, then having that belief that you're enough, you know? And I think that's a big part of your own mental health, believing yourself that you are enough. And that brings us really nicely to our next conversation, which is with Mychal Threets.
Yeah, Mychal Threets, he is a librarian and he makes viral videos with book recommendations, library services, and just affirming messages in general. And he is also the resident librarian for PBS Kids.
And Katherine from Austin, Texas interviewed him in person.
Hi, Mychal. Thank you for speaking with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So you like doing a lot of things, but what's your main job?
Yeah, a literacy ambassador, a mental health ambassador, an advocate, and just a person trying to remind people that the library is always there for them and that their mental health has always mattered and will always matter.
Is it okay if I ask, what made you start talking about mental health more?
In my life, I suffer from anxiety, I suffer from depression, I suffer from nightmare disorder, I suffer from panic disorder. It always feels like I'm reading a grocery list when I talk about the things I'm diagnosed with. So I think I realized how many people are also suffering from those things. I would talk to, when I was a children's librarian, I would talk to students a lot of times and I would realize how much pain they're in. just being alive. I think a lot of times when we talk about mental health struggles, we're always looking for a reason as to why we're suffering, which makes sense because we're like, what is the reason? How do I get past this? But we forget that sometimes people don't know what that reason is yet. And that oftentimes creates much more struggle, a much bigger cry for help. So I wanted to just have the conversation with people. And that's why I talked about it on social media, is to let people know you can talk about it. People aren't going to shun you. They're not going to push you away. I think deep down, a lot of us really want to talk about this subject.
How did you first come up with the idea to spread library joy, and what does it mean to you?
And I think it just came to me, and I was just like, library joy. I'm like, because that is the joy of the library. It's a joy of hearing of a library kid finding the book they've been looking for, falling in love with Magic Treehouse, falling in love with Junie B. Jones, falling in love with Animorphs, realizing that there's Miles Morales books, that there's Pokemon books, that there's cooking books. And I'm like, that's so cool. Even times like grown-ups hate it, but they find out that there's video games at the library. And they're like, the library has video games? And the grown-ups are like, don't tell them that. We're here for books. I'm like, this is how we get them to the books. And all those things are just library joy. So library joy to me, like today, it changes every single day. But today is that there is something for everybody at the local library. I love that so much, that people can find joy in the library, that they're finding joy in the library. They're like, I forgot how much I love the library. I forgot that I loved story time. I forgot that I found my favorite books at the library, because oftentimes they couldn't afford books, and they're able to know that there's graphic novels, that there's audiobooks, and now there's musical instrument collections, there's board game collections. You can rent tools from the library, you can read manga, there's author talks, and all these people are also writing books. The Steph Currys of the world are writing books. Malala is writing books. Simone Biles is writing books. They just made a picture book about Chapel Roan. All these things are happening in the world and in the library, and I think that's what library joy is for me. It's just a person who gets very excited, very happy talking about books, and it's also that the library is one of the very last few places where you can just be exactly who you are. You don't need a library card. You should get a library card, but you don't have to have it to go to the library, and it's always there for you whenever you're ready.
That's amazing. So going back to your social media and how much you influenced a lot of people, who influenced you?
I love my grandparents. I think I'm very lucky to have lived with all four of my grandparents for a very, very long time. 2 of them are still alive, which is very rare at my age. I just lost my grandmother maybe 4 or 5 months ago. And she was so amazing. She lived to be 90 years old. And she always reminded me that not everybody could always have a library card, could always visit the library. She was African American, so she grew up living to be 90 years old. There was a time where she wasn't allowed to have a library card or to even visit the library. So she was always super proud that I got to go around bothering people about libraries and library card when it was something that she couldn't have. And I would just like to encourage everybody to get a library card, to use their library card, to thank their local librarian, their local educators, their teachers, the grown-ups in their lives, the people that matters. Thank your friends. Don't be afraid to talk about your mental health. Don't be afraid to say it's okay to not be okay, because it's okay to need help. We all have some bad days. And I'm always rooting for anybody out there, as a person who is proud to be alive, who's happy every single day, to not take it for granted. I hope they feel the same way one day.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
You know, one thing I found really cool about that whole conversation is after his whole, like mental health message, the way that he kind of goes about and tackles that is through using his role as a librarian to find books for people. Because I think therapy is kind of a very targeted thing. You talk about your issues, and books kind of have that same ability to just, there's so many books about so many things in life. You can always kind of find a voice that resonates with you. And I think it's really cool, a really cool way to go about, helping people with things like anxiety or just things they're suffering with in their life, to kind of hear that in a book.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you think of someone writing a book, they've probably been through the same struggles that, you would be searching for if you were to read that particular book. And I think it can be a very validating experience if you read a book and you find out some other human in the world is struggling with the same thing and found a way through it, and you're reading through their experience.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think just having that shared experience is really valuable. Like when I listen to songs, I love finding songs that are like just oddly specific to my mood or whatever issue. And I feel like when I find that, it's like, oh my God, that's exactly what I'm feeling. And I just like listen to that song on repeat, and it's kind of healing in a way, just hearing someone's been through the same thing, hearing someone's been through the same emotions as you.
So you're saying every time I sit in your car, I'm just experiencing through all your emotions.
Maybe.
I'm being forced to live through what you're living through.
Maybe. Yeah. Some of my playlists are like that. So
Yeah.
here's for you to know. You know, one thing also Mychal brought up, remember a couple episodes ago, I was advocating for the library card.
Yeah, and I actually got a library card like a month ago, but it wasn't because of your recommendation. I had an instinct.
Well,
I
at
just
least-
knew Mychal was going to talk about, you know, the benefits of library services. And I figured I'd prepare myself.
Well, at least, you know, I'm not the library nerd you make me out to be. I have someone who agrees with my opinion.
No, I never disagreed.
You call me a nerd.
I called you nerd, but I didn't disagree. I love libraries.
Okay. Yeah, no, libraries are
This
great.
is actually I'm just kidding. Anyways, wrap it up.
Before we go, we do have another podcast that we recommend if you love libraries like us and books.
From the American Library Association comes How I Library, the podcast that asks today's newsmakers how they library. Join us as we talk to people like actors and filmmakers Ethan and Maya Hawke, comedian Paula Poundstone, author Jason Reynolds, composer Alan Menken, and more, as they discuss their favorite library memories, how they use the library, and their thoughts on issues facing the library world. Along the way, we learn about their work, their passions, and more. You can find How I Library wherever you listen to podcasts or ilovelibraries.org.
Today's segments were produced by Beatrix and Katherine from Austin, Texas.
Lead podcast producer Briget Ganske produced this episode with editing and mixing by Wyatt Mays and help from Genesis Magpayo.
Ryan James is our camera and audio operator.
Approval and oversight by editorial director Marie Cusick and executive producer Leah Clapman.
Theme music by Isaiah Brown. Additional music from Blue Dot Sessions.
See you next week.
Bye.